Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture, and today we are finally going to be talking about the newest album from Foxing, Nearer My God. So over the past few months, I think some people might have gotten the impression that I've been more harsh or negative than usual. And while it is kind of true that I found less albums that I'd say are easy fits for among the best of 2018, let's flip the script a little bit and talk about a trend in indie rock that I've actually come to like a fair bit. See, as part of the success of the third wave of emo in the 2010s, over the past couple of years, we've seen an expanded wave of rock artists dig into some raw, emotive territory, but also harness a little bit more maturity and self-awareness and poise, splitting the difference between overeducated detachment and the painful realization that so much of that will not save them anymore. If you're asking why I relate to it, don't look at me like that. We all get to that age. I'm fine. Everything is fine. And make no mistake, this might have been a thematic trend that had been primed by the third wave of emo, but it's bled enough into indie rock and alternative rock and might have been coming naturally that it's hard not to think that the pretentious coffee house hipsters of the early 2010s are having midlife crises in 2018. From the wine-soaked breakdowns of the older guard like Josh Tillman and Matt Berninger of The National, to the overeducated depression of Will Toledo, to the palpable angst of Def Havana and the Wonder Years. And somewhere in the middle, inhabiting an intricate blend of post-hardcore rage, post-rock atmospherics, and indie rock meticulousness, we've got Foxing. And honestly, I should have tackled this band months ago, because from the ramshackle, reckless howling of their debut, The Albatross in 2013, to the more intricate and reserved fragmentation of Dealer 2 years later in 2015, Foxing, they were definitely inhabiting this lane and doing it quite well. And with their third album, Near My God, primed to blow everything up on steroids with their longest, most explosive, most experimental project to date, I definitely wanted to take this in, albeit 2 months late. So, what do we get with this? Oh wow, I was not expecting this whatsoever. And before I get into the discussion of this album proper, which again I should have done 2 months ago, I'm behind, I want to make a disclaimer. The appeal and target audience of this album in particular should be narrower than it probably is. Because Near My God might as well be tailor-made for the audience of guys just like me that I described, and paradoxically, it'll be critics in this audience and lane who will praise this to high heavens, as some already have. Even though to the majority of audiences, this album will rake up pretension, privilege, and a desperate overwrought angst to the extreme. And if Foxing weren't looking to deconstruct the ever-loving shit out of all that, I'd say this would be utterly insufferable. And as somebody outside of the target audience that I described, I can absolutely still see this album not connecting whatsoever. But as somebody who is in on that niche, yeah, for me it's one of the best rock albums of this year, hands down. And paradoxically falls into the bizarre niche of likely making a lot of critics' list while taking a sledgehammer to the genre and attitudes that those critics might inhabit and love to this day. In other words, it's really quite a lot, but it pulls it off. And this is where the conversation has to start, with theme. Because I'm a big fan of deconstruction and albums that tear into their own genre. It's a big reason to this day I consider Elvi's album Return to the Moon one of the best records of the 2010s. Most because it takes the paradigm of 2010s hipster relationships and the music made about it, and the artists that make that music, and then guts them on the floor. And make no mistake, Foxing is doing something kind of similar, but on a very big scale. Basically calling out the bluff of the angst of the white, overeducated, privileged indie rock and emo kids, and asking all what that really means in 2018. And this isn't subtext, this is in the text of songs that are in full-fledged drunken meltdown for the first half of the album. And if you haven't clued in by the second song, Slapstick, that you're not supposed to really completely like or sympathize with the protagonist in apocalyptic melodrama, well, you're gonna hate this album, full stop, because this is not exactly a sympathetic portrayal. And again, this is an album that starts off with happiness that just seems just out of reach, and then spends its first half flaying itself alive in an attempt to achieve that happiness, with the subject of Slapstick being Donald Trump himself, and his continuous flailing attempt to find something to fill the overprivileged void within, and constantly demanding for more doors to be opened for him than just to fall through them again and again. And note the usage of the first person. Foxing's very clearly drawing a universal parallel to all the overprivileged white guys, and that analogy continues into Lich Prince and how that guy can be a soul-sucking terror in relationships. And then it's followed up with Gameshark, showing how privilege can cheat the system. And while there is a palpable feeling of disgust and guilt in abusing that in that self-awareness, there's also a heady rush that plays into one's worst instincts until it doesn't work anymore. And then you get the title track, because Foxing is smart enough to realize for as much as you're flailing for attention and validation in your self-destruction, and how it might just be easier to become the pool boy of music, to be told an artistic direction instead of creating and then falling apart, even the creation is hollow. And increasingly people just don't give a shit about you. So you get the slow motion artistic suicide of 5 Cups, and the framing blurs even further between tragic immolation and pitiable self-indulgence. And then the album changes the game. The visceral thrill of the first half, which can feel way too comfortable for some audiences, it's confronted with reality on Heartbeats, where the genre deconstruction snaps into view, because just like with How to Dress Well a week or so ago, the self-destruction has become somewhat performative, because there's an entire audience of guys like me who guiltily will embrace it regardless of self-awareness. So the script is flipped. Heartbeats includes on the hook the line, "Stop playing around," and the album starts digging into the guts of where some of that angst might actually be rooted. Not invalidating it, but not indulging it either. Trapped in Dillard's is a great example of this, showing him amidst barren suburban consumerism silently judging a girl who has found faith in the banal setting, and yet he won't stop spending so much of the song repeating his message if he wasn't trying to partially convince himself. And this comes back on Crown Candy, which flips Pascal's wager surrounding belief in God and how performative it can feel both in life and love, especially in social situations, if it feels performative and then wasted, but it's not like he's stopping any of it. Because at the same search for something real that he doesn't want to fully admit he's following, just like everybody else. And it's one reason why Bastardizer hit so damn hard, tapping into pretty much every guy's complicated relationship with their father figures, only to reveal how much of it is perpetuated within them going forward, good and bad. And I love how the production of the song is drenched in mid to late 80s heartland rock and its guitar tones. Some things, they really do stay the same and pick up that same level of resonance. And that growth of populism gives the final 2 songs some real power, because in the rejection of the system and the privilege that allows you to game it, that system will throw the kitchen sink to crush you down just like everybody else. It doesn't care. But that system only seems all the more hollow for as hard as it tries. And I love how Lambert returns to the heavenly metaphors of the opening cut, where the walled-off salvation and happiness is still out of reach, maybe even more so, symbolized through airports where the destination windows are ever shrinking, but instead of the sanctimonious entitlement to deserve that happiness, there's a weary resignation in the fact that those who might stray but can still try, they kind of might want to get the entry too. In the face of everything tumbling down, the album cover is none too subtle in the metaphor of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Despite all the walls that are being thrown up and how shoddy they might feel, we're all in the struggle together. Come back home. Come back down to earth. And really, that's just the content, of which I'll freely admit I might have completely overanalyzed. But I'll be very honest, the album had done such a powerful job winning me over in the songwriting and poetry in the thematic arc that praising the actual music kinda initially fell by the wayside. But that's exactly what I wanted coming out of Foxing, bringing the raw intensity to match the overrange production of Dealer, and then shamelessly sell all that bombast. I'll freely admit it took a while to get on board with any of Connor Murphy's falsetto vocals, and the layering of them against some rougher, lower tones can sound a little screechy and disquieting, but for what this album is putting forward, it makes sense, it works, especially the ominous pianos and brittle guitar plucks that punch into the heavier, roiling groove of that opening song, which also fits with the drunker, blubbery atmospherics of Slapstick, where the surging groove becomes just as sharp, and it's that same desperate charge that gives the grimy, noisy scratch of Gameshark its melodic punch against that killer bass line, and makes the huge hooks of Lich Prince and the title track connect, even though both songs sound like the sort of oversold anthems that the 1975 would sell straight, and that with this lyrical content, Foxing should absolutely not try to sell. Hell, you could almost argue splitting the transgressive distance gives the gleaming title track so much power, which is something I can't quite say about the spacious 9-minute slow-motion collapse of 5 cuts that it pulls off quite as well. Even if I do think there's just enough momentum in the shuddering bass line, the roaring guitars, the fractured strings, the horns, the samples, and the extended skipping outro to make it worthwhile. It's still a good song, but it does run a little long. Thank God Foxing will take some of that elegance and repurpose it to paradoxically, somewhat, ground the histrionics on heartbeats, or embrace the fractured, beeping normalcy in the stutter of Trapped-in Dillards, or even the bagpipes they bring into the old-school heartland rock of Bastardizer that shouldn't work nearly as well as they do, but it almost feels generational in the callback. And I like how while the album could be perceived to flag in energy with 5 cups, it somehow keeps up all the exhausting momentum into the driving acoustics of Crown Candy, but is confident enough to give both it and the strings accordion combination driving the skittering drums and bass of Won't Drown slightly more off-kilter, but instrumentally cohesive melodic interludes. And even then, that sense of exhaustion that comes with the album running so fast, it conveys over into the content as well, and leaving Lambert to lean more heavily on spare, echoing post-rock, until it just goes for broke with drummer John Hellwig likely holding up as the unsung MVP of the project. Seriously, just for as consistent the grooves are and how much driving power the percussion has without feeling overstated or dominant against such dense arrangements, I gotta give this guy major props, and really the songs and the emotional dynamic running through the album, it fits, it works too. But as I said before, this album's absolutely not for everybody. It's grandiose and ambitious and in the extreme, and kind of disquieting in the emotive rawness of what it's trying to do. It's the sort of record that to some will seem histrionic, oversold, and to some even unnecessary, especially if they don't get it. Hell, from the first half, it makes a pretty great argument against its own existence, only to find some degree of paradoxical validation in the very human conclusion of it all. But for me, it's an absolute tour de force that justifies the insane risk. A project like this could have gone wrong in so many ways. The go-for-broke power of an album like Near My God, though, it's undeniable. Netting a 9 out of 10 from me and the highest recommendations, provided, of course, you followed the disclaimer I made early in the review. This will not be for everybody. But if you do follow that disclaimer, if this is for you, if this sort of emo and indie rock is up your alley, well, this album might just set that alley on fire. But oh man, so worth it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yes, I know this review is late. Yes, I know this took a while to get up my schedule. But oh my god, yes, it is worth it. It is a kick-ass album and one that I am so happy that I got a chance to get to. If you want to buy or stream it, links down there below. And I got the poll up there. Again, I'm imagining that my unequivocal praise is probably going to draw some attention, so there's all your chance to see if you agree with me. Beyond that, anything else I might be able to do or to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And hey, if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, help support this channel so I could have covered this album back in August like I should have, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote for my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even the top 10 list to that schedule. More details right over there. If you want to see my schedule, it's on my Instagram, link down there below. But till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.